Is real estate investing for you? Well, maybe you saw my first video on this, 5 first steps to getting you started in real estate. And if not, it's in the link below in the description as well as in the tag. But just briefly in this video, we're going to talk about 5 more steps to getting you started in real estate. Now, if you haven't seen that first video, we're really talking about things like saving, building your credit, deciding on what kind of property, also building a team of people, and finally researching the area. But in this video, we're going to do a little bit more, 5 more tips to getting you started. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. First here is thinking about the core method. That is condition, over-improved, rent, and extra. So condition, we're mostly going to focus on this one now. The condition is a fixer-upper, something that needs work, some tender love and care. If you can put some money into it, you can improve it, you can drag up the actual price of the property. Good. The next thing is over-improved. Now, some properties, the previous owner might have put in some wainscoting, some paneling, maybe some surround sound speakers in the walls or in the ceiling. Typically speaking, it's not going to raise the value of the property by all that much. So maybe they spent $50,000 and the only difference in the value of the property went up by $20,000. So you're getting $50,000 of improvements for only $20,000. If that's what you want to do, great. Third thing is rent. So this is usually for 2 units and more. So a multi-family, like a duplex, triplex, a quadplex, and so on. Here it's where, let's say, the previous owner did not raise the rents over the years to keep up with market rent. As a result, when you look at multifamily, typically we look at the value of the property as a multiple of the rent. And so if you can actually increase the rent, you can increase the value of the property. Extra, well, here we're thinking about doing things, for instance, like making it go to short-term, legally, making it going to short-term from a long-term. That can really increase the cash flow and the income, etc. Could be legalizing it, bringing it up to code, other things as well. Now, fixer-upper, probably the best, my favorite part, but the rent is also good. But the next thing you're thinking of doing is, all right, so have a strategy, let's think about going under contract. So what do we do? Well, first is negotiation. Look, the price you see is just the asking price. Your bid is typically less than the asking price. And you just don't have to pay it, right? You don't have to pay that higher price necessarily. So for instance, in my first unit that I purchased, it was going for about $540. It was on the market for the best part of a year. It came down to $535 or thereabouts. And I came in saying at $440 was my offer originally. We negotiated, they came down to $530, they came down a bit lower. I came up to about $450. And at $450, they kept coming down a little bit. And I said, you know what, $450 is good. Eventually we settled on $460. So I went up by 20 from $440 to $460, but they came down by 80 from $540 to $460. Another deal that I did, I think the house was going originally for about $550. I came in at $490. Again, you don't want to go in too low because you might annoy them, right? You might not get any kind of negotiation. Speak to your real estate agent about this. So I came in at $490, and eventually after negotiating, we settled on about $506. So I went up by about $16,000, but they went down by about $44,000. Right? So negotiate, negotiate, negotiate. Now, if you're taking a regular mortgage out, you might have contingencies. Again, a mortgage company might say to you, look, the house needs to be worth, if they're giving you a mortgage of $400,000, it needs to be worth at least $400,000, and they're not going to be too happy if it's not. So if the house is only worth $200,000, they're going to send somebody out to check this. So this is part of the inspection, or about the appraisal process. So under your contract, you could have certain contingencies. Again, the more contingencies, it gets a little more difficult to do a negotiation or to actually get a seller to agree to your offer. There's another contingency, we call it the inspection contingency. So a bit like a car, when you're getting a car, you might want to have a PPI or pre-purchase inspection. Same for a house. So it could be that you want to send in an inspector to check the roof, check the windows, check the electric, check the plumbing. You're probably not going to negotiate with the seller drastically lower after this, but you could get a few small items. They usually call it F off money. In other words, a seller has a little pool of a few thousand that just to keep the deal alive, right? Because the buyer could just leave. You could just get out of it if, once under your inspection contingency within the number of days. So check your contract, but you could get out of it after the inspection. By just saying, look, I don't like the way the wind blows, right? So you have these contingencies to protect you, right? But it also makes it more difficult to get the deal in the first place because sellers typically just want to get paid. They want to move on with their life, right? They don't want a long closing period. So finally, under contract, you might want to think about putting a low down payment. And here we're thinking about maybe 5%. If you're moving into a property, it's not an investment property, it's a place you're moving into to live in. So you're kind of bank hacking. So instead of putting 20% down, let's say a $500,000 property, that would mean 100,000. Well, at 5%, that's only 25,000. It's a lot easier to save 25,000 than it is to save 100,000. So with that extra 75,000, you could use it for part of the fixing up. You could use it for your next property. Who knows, right? So again, there are issues. Sometimes you got to look into this, the pros and the cons, but this could be a way for you to get into places faster. The third thing you're going to do, again, when you get the keys, it's the fun day. You're getting the keys to your place, you're signing and you're moving in. Now you're probably going to be fixing up the place. You're going to be rehabbing, renovating the place. You could make a series of videos on this. And after the first property, it does get easier, right? Because you might spend a lot of time on that first property down in Home Depot or Lowe's. And to be honest, I think I probably owed them rent for the amount of hours and days that I spent living in Home Depot and Lowe's, just going in there and checking things out. But after the first time you've done a property, it's a lot quicker because you don't have to take the same amount of time making decisions about the paint color, what kind of tiling, etc. So it does get easier if you do this a few times, but it's a big part of the process. Now, the next thing you want to do once you've fixed up the place is you want to reappraise it, take the money out. So thinking about reappraising, well, if you have a 5% down payment, anything that's less than 20% for a mortgage, you're going to be paying PMI or private mortgage insurance. You'd like to lower that, right? Or remove it altogether. That would lower your monthly mortgage. And you can ask your mortgage company to remove it. And they might say to you, well, look, you only put down 5% and maybe you've been paying it for a few months, a few years while you've been fixing it up and living in it. Maybe you've put down 6% now, 7%, you've paid down the principal a little bit. They'll say to you, well, in 6 years or 7 years from now, you'll get to the 20%. Well, you might say to them, look, I put a significant amount of investment in terms of fixing this place up. Could you please send out an appraiser to have a look at the value of the property? Because look, if the value of the property goes way, way up, you don't owe the mortgage company the profit, the extra money that you got. That's yours. You owe them the fixed principal plus the interest, but you don't owe them the extra amount. So if the market drove the price of the property up, or if you forced the appreciation of the property, you can get, for a small fee, you can ask an appraiser to come out and to see, typically speaking, that it's now that you own an equity of at least 20% of the property. Again, check your mortgage company because it can differ. Also, just keep in mind that it may not be the original company that gave you the mortgage in the first place. Often it's the case that the mortgage company sells your mortgage on a secondary market to another service company that is now servicing your mortgage. And they usually send you a letter or communicate somewhat to you to say, well, we're now taking over your loan. Happened to me several times in just a few years. Another thing you can do when you own a property and you're living in a property is take out a home equity line of credit, otherwise known as a HELOC. This is great because usually they have things like a 90% LTV or loan to value ratio. So let's say when you have at least 10% ownership of the property, anything above that you might be able to take out. So now you've got, let's say, 30% ownership or 30% equity. So between that 10 and 30 is 20%. So they'll do a calculation on the value of your property, they'll get that 20%, and there's a dollar value that you're able to get a loan for. Now you're not taking out a loan, it's like a credit card, it's only when you use it. Typically you're writing a check, but it's only when you use it, and you could use it for things like renovations, maybe more investments, other things as well. Now, that's obviously the nicest thing to do is to get a HELOC, but let's say that you've left the property. It's now an investment property, or you just purchased an investment property. At that point, you can no longer get a HELOC, but you can get an RLOC, which is a rental line of credit. Typically, though, they're a bit more strict because they don't think about your secondary home as safe as your primary home. So they want you to own more. It could be 40%, could be 50%. So typically you kind of want to wait until you're around there, but do shop around for this. And it's also a bit more difficult to qualify for. But it's always good getting money out of your property. So final thing is rent. Now you're living there a year, you fixed it up, you've reappraised it, got rid of the PMI, maybe you've taken a HELOC out, you've moved out of it, you're there at least a year. And now that you've moved it out, you want to get some renters in. And this is a great part of real estate because now the renters, hopefully, if you've done your numbers correctly, they're paying down your mortgage, your principal, interest, taxes and insurance, your PITI, possibly more as well. Maybe your utilities, maybe repair, maintenance, maybe you've got management company, things like that, like the timber D, right? Other things like depreciation, tax, etc. But think about the renters as, again, it could be a whole other series of videos, right? Property management, but that's the ultimate goal, is to place renters. Then you can kind of move on with your life into the next one. So hopefully, guys, these 5 tips, again, your core strategy, how to go under contract, a few little tips about that, negotiation, appraising, inspection contingencies, and also low down payment, fixing up a property, getting money out of the property, either reappraising it, refinancing it, HELOCing it, RLOCing it, and finally renting it. So if you found these helpful, please do me a solid. I'd really appreciate it. Just smash that like button, and also don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss another video. It really helps the YouTube algorithm, and I greatly appreciate it. It means the world to me. So thank you so much, you guys, and I hope that if it's for you to become a real estate investor, that it works out in your favor. Until the next time.